The 20th century began with hope, new inventions, growing cities, and dreams of progress. But beneath the surface, tensions brewed like storm clouds. National pride, political rivalry, and industrial ambition collided in ways the world had never seen before. And when the storm finally broke, it reshaped humanity forever. The world wars were not just battles between nations, they were turning points in history, moments when the world learned, at a terrible cost, what it truly meant to be global. The First World War, often called the Great War, erupted in 1914. It began with a single spark, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. But that spark ignited a powder keg of alliances. Europe, divided into rival powers, quickly fell into chaos. On one side stood the Allied powers, France, Britain, Russia, and later the United States. On the other were the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. It was a war unlike anything before it. The old ways of fighting were shattered by new machines of destruction. Tanks rolled across muddy battlefields. Machine guns cut through lines of soldiers. Poison gas filled the trenches, and airplanes took to the skies for the first time in combat. Millions of men lived and died in the cold, wet trenches of Europe. The sound of artillery thundered for years, reshaping not just land but lives. By 1918, the war finally ended, but at a heavy cost. Over 16 million lives were lost, and much of Europe lay in ruins. The Treaty of Versailles blamed Germany for the war and demanded enormous reparations. Instead of bringing peace, it planted the seeds of resentment. Seeds that would grow into an even greater catastrophe. In the years that followed, the world tried to rebuild. The 1920s brought a burst of optimism, jazz, art, and new technology flourished. But behind the glitter of progress lay growing instability. The Great Depression of 1929 crushed economies and left millions unemployed. People began to lose faith in democracy and looked to strong leaders for answers. Out of this darkness rose figures who promised glory but delivered destruction, most notably Adolf Hitler in Germany. By 1939, the world was at war again. This time, the conflict was even larger, deadlier, and more global. World War II pitted the Allied powers led by Britain, the Soviet Union, China, and the United States against the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. It was a war of ideologies, democracy versus dictatorship, freedom versus tyranny. Europe once again became a battlefield. Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland triggered the war, followed by the rapid conquest of much of Europe. France fell, London was bombed, and millions of civilians were caught in the crossfire. In the East, Japan's expansion through Asia and the attack on Pearl Harbor brought America into the war. What had begun as a European conflict had now engulfed the entire world. The horrors of World War II were unmatched. The Holocaust, one of history's darkest chapters, saw 6 million Jews and millions of others systematically murdered. The war pushed human cruelty and courage to their extremes. Entire cities were reduced to ashes, and entire generations were marked by loss. But through this suffering, heroes rose, soldiers, resistance fighters, and everyday people who refused to surrender to evil. By 1945, the Axis powers were defeated. Hitler's empire collapsed. Mussolini was executed, and Japan surrendered after the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ushering in the nuclear age. The war had claimed more than 70 million lives, reshaping borders and redefining power. Europe lay in ruins. Asia was devastated, and the world was forever changed. In the ashes of war, new hopes emerged. The United Nations was formed to promote peace and prevent future global conflicts. Former enemies became allies, rebuilding nations and forming new partnerships. But the end of the war also marked the beginning of a new tension. The Cold War, as the United States and the Soviet Union competed for global influence, dividing the world between capitalism and communism. The world wars were more than military conflicts. They were mirrors of humanity's potential for both creation and destruction. They showed how technology could advance civilization or annihilate it. They reminded the world that progress without compassion leads to tragedy. Yet, from the ruins rose a new determination. Nations rebuilt, institutions formed, and a shared dream of peace took root. The same human ingenuity that once built weapons of war now turned toward rebuilding, creating hospitals, schools, and industries. Air travel connected continents, communication became faster, and the global community began to take shape. The century that shook humanity left deep scars. But it also taught powerful lessons about unity, forgiveness, and resilience. The wars reminded us that while human ambition can destroy, it can also heal. The generation that endured the world's darkest days became the one that built a brighter tomorrow. The story of the world wars is not just about loss. It's about rebirth. It's the story of how, after two devastating conflicts, the world chose cooperation over chaos, hope over hatred. It is a story that continues to echo today, a reminder that peace is fragile, but always worth fighting for.